Well, to paraphrase David Letterman, my next guest needs no introduction, but he deserves one anyway. So if you're a marketer, if you're a chief marketer, everybody knows Antonio Lucio. But for the rest of the C-suite who's in our audience, you should know this. Besides being a mentor to many of today's CMOs and aspiring ones, Antonio is a legit and I'm sorry, this is going to make you uncomfortable. Just deal with it. Is a legit and bona fide legend in business and marketing. While today he is both the Chief Marketing and Corporate Affairs Officer for HP. This is in fact his second stint at HP, where he was CMO previously, this time also adding the Corporate Affairs title. He's also been Global CMO at both Visa and Meta. And he was, in fact, Chief Innovation and Chief Innovation and Portfolio Transformation Officer at PepsiCo. Antonio's got mad accolades, and so I'm just going to call out a few, which is he's a member of the AAF Hall of Fame, the AMA Hall of Fame, and in 2022 was inducted into the Forbes CMO Hall of Fame, which really makes him one of very few. By the way, are you uncomfortable yet? Because I'm kind of hoping to make you I'm not
going to be able to say a word.
Which makes him one of very few to be recognized by all three. Antonio, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. It's good to see you.
Thank you for the. It's always very nice to spend time with you. I always found you to have a very unique a non-apologetic point of view. And I think in times of transformation, as we are all going through as an industry, those points of view and these types of conversations are needed more than ever.
Well, I will say, I don't know that I would call it unapologetic, because sometimes I do find myself needing to apologize for a few things, but it's certainly uncensored, or maybe I should say it's fucking uncensored. All right. All right. I want to start somewhere differently with you than we typically do, where we ask, that series of kind of templated questions to get into things. But with you, I want to start in a slightly different place, and in fact ask you two questions, Antonio, which is one, why from your decades of perspective and experience do you think on a relative basis, it's not even on a relative basis, it's on a quantifiable data basis, so few of the world's largest company CEOs come from marketing, why so few boards on a relative basis have CMO representation? And actually, let me just stick a pin in that, and I'll get to the second question next.
Yeah, I think we need to qualify that statement, Seth, because although in aggregate that statement is true, when you actually look at it by sectors, most of the CEOs on the consumer goods companies are coming either from the marketing or the commercial function. What has happened over the last 20 to 30 years is that the number of CPG companies relative to the non-CPG companies the numbers have significantly shifted. And there is a fundamental difference for that. If you're in a CPG world, it is all about the consumer, and every effort begins and ends with her. If you're in the non-CPG world, you're about invention. You're about products. It is about technology. It is about science. It is about discovery, and the marketing function then becomes kind of a service function to the overall business, and therefore most likely a minority of us are going to end up in the CEO chair. So that difference is actually very, very important.
I think it's a great point. And of course, you and I are both old enough that we've got kind of CPG backgrounds. We weren't doing this when Don Draper, we weren't even alive when Don Draper was doing what Don Draper was doing. But that foundation, I think is a foundation we share. But you bring up in your answer not just a fair point to distinguish by industry and sector, although again, if you look at the 500 largest companies, it is 90% of the CEOs who don't, which in fact reflects your point about the shift in global commerce. But implicit in your answer is like CPG is really focused on her, and tech is focused on innovation and invention and this and that. innovation and invention and product, for that matter, or service from a B2B perspective, are of course also focused on her, because if they don't focus on her, they will not sell to her or to him or to them or to they. So why do you think that's not better understood inside that sector in those categories?
Uh, because the starting point is different. If you're going to start with any offering in the CPG type of world, you begin with consumer or customer research. When you're again, let's use the opposite side of that, which is tech. The starting point is a conceptual problem that you are going to solve. It's
Right.
not research. So then a product offering is developed, a product offering that will perhaps have nothing to do what it is known as of today. And then therefore, um, that's the case of Visa, that's the case of Google, that's the case of Meta, that's the case of Amazon. That's the case of multiple new categories that today are par for the course.
Yeah.
It did not start with consumer research. It started with a problem that someone wanted to solve, leveraging either an algorithm, either discovery or science to actually do so. Because of that, then those functions, whether it is banking or in the case of financial services, or engineering in the case of some of the tech companies, or in other companies called the product offices, they become kind of the center of the company, and then the marketing function becomes a service to that.
Yeah.
Because of that lack of understanding of what the traditional marketing function can do, the world in which you and I grew up in the CPG world, I was just talking to Greg Lyons from PepsiCo. You still have responsibility of what we used to call the 4 Ps or the 4 Es nowadays: product or experience, the price value relationship of it, the promotion or experiences created around them, and then the distribution of it. In the consumer good world, still to this day, the brief for R&D comes from marketing. They are the ones that have the understanding of the consumers. They create the brief, and products come out of that. They own the value equation of it, which helps inform sales when it comes to the pricing. They understand the dynamic of consumer behavior through the totality of the engagement model. So it helps sort out what we place, which is no longer a place, but the distribution strategy, digital or not. Outside of the consumer good world, those four isolated responsibilities are separated. So the product offices or engineering controls completely the product offering part of it. The sales function controls the price value relationship of it. The distribution, depending on whether you have a digital or not, has a completely different set of responsibilities. And then marketing becomes a very narrowly defined responsibility, which is about demand generation and brand building, which is with performance marketing and everything that we know about branding. When you reduce the marketing function to that specificity, it's very difficult to say, you know what, this is the person that should run the company relative to the engineers.
I love that. Well, I don't love it, but I love what you've said. I don't love that that's where we are, because as I think anyone who's listened to this knows, I think it gets in the way of growth. So you bring up a perfect segue to my second question. My second question, I'm going to ask it, and then I want to contextualize it based on some things you've said, which is, again, based on your breadth of experience, what few things do you think the CEOs, the CFOs, the rest of the C-suite inside non-CPG companies need to better understand about marketing, so that marketing becomes better able, and CMOs become better able to drive growth that's at the core of their remit? Because what you've said, and it will come as no surprise. I agree with you completely. That isolation, that reduction, isolation flies in the face of integration. Reduction flies in the face of and has tension with expansion. So even if marketing is limited to in those companies to demand creation and capture, what drives what is growth but the relationship between those two? So where would you advise the CEO of Acme Technology Company to spend a little bit more time getting versed?
I think that part of the conversations that we have as an industry always goes into, well, the CEO needs to understand marketing more, and we need to educate the CEO. Seth, honestly, I've always taken the opposite route to that, because there is an inherent reduction of what the function should do. The role of the CMO becomes significantly more critical, which is the first job is you need to earn a seat at the business table. And everybody talks about that rather lightly. Yeah, of course, because we're business people first and marketing people second. It's really hard when
But
you
that's
are
not, I
going.
mean, by the way, you're right. I'm sorry to interrupt. Everybody talks about it, but the fact of the matter is CMOs have so much responsibility because so many are not, in fact, business people first. And so they're by default, they're not earning a seat at the table, which I also want to ask you about, but sorry,
So
keep going.
what I was going to say is the first responsibility of a CMO coming into Acme or Meta or Visa or HP is to actually be able to understand the business and be able to explain and build bridges as to how what you do actually drives the business
Yeah.
forward from a revenue standpoint, from a reputational standpoint, against the multiple stakeholders. That responsibility, I believe, that falls in the hands of the CMO. And because if it is not natural, that's what I'm trying to say, because it is such a narrow definition of marketing. The moment that you go in and you're actually using the language of the business as opposed to the language of marketing to actually create the bridge between the business objective and what marketing can do, and by the way, this is the way that we're going to be able to measure results, then the conversation shifts. The problem, or the graveyard of CMOs is full of people that fail to understand that. That is kind of, the CEO should understand the value of the brand. I've never seen it that way. I've always owned that responsibility, and the moment that you begin to earn a seat at the business table, where you are actually able to have very strong points of view as to how to grow the business beyond advertising,
Yes.
then the shifts begin to happen.
I again, of course, I agree with you. I do think two things can be true, which is that the CEO, CFO, et cetera, should understand the importance of those things. And it's up to the CMO, if they do not, to take the time to speak the language of business to help them understand. But one of the things that I find, and I've talked about it on the show before, so amazing, is how quick the C-suite, painting with a broad brush, can be to dismiss their own lived experience, right? To dismiss why they're wearing the shoes they are, carrying the bags they are, driving the car they are, living in the neighborhood, why their pantries are filled with brands X, Y, and Z, as if they think all those things happen by osmosis and as something other than marketing, and as if they would drive the exact same car if it had a more utilitarian logo upon its hood. I don't get it. Do you have a thought on why they do deny their lived experience? Do you have any stories that, kind of illustrate it?
I mean, the one of my moments, the first time that I was facing Mark Zuckerberg, and we had a very specific mandate to actually create demand for the group's products on their Facebook.
Yeah, when you were CMO, it was still Facebook.
When I was CMO, it was still Facebook, and this
Yeah.
was specifically about the Facebook platform relative to
Right.
Instagram and WhatsApp and Messenger that were part of the portfolio that I was leading from a marketing standpoint. We had conversations on strategy. We had conversations numbers first,
Hmm.
which is something that some marketers moving into the non-CPG world do not understand, which is kind
Yeah.
of in the CPG world, you lead with ideas and you finalize with numbers, which is kind of like, this is what's going to happen. And by the way, rest assured that I'm taking care of the numbers. Outside of the CPG world is completely the opposite. You lead with numbers. And then, by the way, sometimes you don't even need to show the period pictures because you've convinced them on a very rational sort of level. The conversation that we had with Mark at the time, he really did not understand what we were saying, and could not understand the concepts. And by the way, that he was surrounded by all the engineers, who all of them had different points of view. And I remember that at that time I said, "Oh my goodness, maybe I'm not in the right company." And that night, I sort of reflected on
I'm sorry,
the way
just
that
for when you say you couldn't understand, were you pitching an idea, a campaign, a strategy?
we were pitching a campaign to make people understand what groups could mean to them in their daily life. And
Right.
we had all the strategy, all the growth numbers for groups, the level of engagement of people that were in groups relative to those that weren't, what were the passion points where people would interact more often. I mean, we had it all. I mean, when you work in a tech company, you live and die by your level of understanding of the business and the numbers. Anyway, so we presented the idea, the strategy, and all that. Great. We presented some of the ideas. He didn't know how to take it. So the meeting did not go very well. So that night,
I've had a
I
few of
kind of
those.
one of those, and you go like, oh my goodness, what happened here? And then I went like, how does Mark communicate his ideas? And at the time, I mean, this was already 7 years ago, and the world have changed dramatically. But at the time, he would take Wednesdays. His Wednesdays was his reflection day. He would work from home, and at the end of the day, you would get everyone that reported into him pray that you weren't the one recipient of the long format, old school.
Yeah.
Seth, long form, very thoughtful approach to what he wanted to do. We need to move Instagram to this place. We need to do this with WhatsApp. I was thinking, and very well thought out, well written, long form document. So that night, I went through. I said, okay, so I'm going to do that for him, and I went very specifically. Our strategy is this. The research that we have is this, the business opportunities that we're going to capture is this, the idea that we're pursuing is this. Oh, and by the way, and then I started using, just like you said, here is a Nike spot that that has pursued a similar strategy. This is he was into boxing at the time. Here is, so it was kind of like, in a way, I was taking the role that I needed to, in order for me to be successful, I needed to educate the CEO as to how I was looking at things. And he could agree or disagree on it. And I remember I sent it, I don't know, it was 1:30 in the morning, and I was going like, I told my wife, I said, maybe it's a very short moment. And what I got back, Seth, was a a very grateful note, because I had taken the time to communicate in his style,
Yeah.
and with a bunch of very thoughtful questions about it. So the whole notion of what you said, let me show you things that you know and like, and how this builds a bridge to that is a critical component of the equation. The CMO, when you're working in the non-CPG world, has to own the role of educating the CEO and the company as to what marketing can do. It is easier when you're doing the performance side of the house because it's very clear this delivers on that. It is harder when you're talking about a bit more upper funnel and but that's one. I mean, I have many stories like that, and it always goes back to, let me build a bridge between the business strategy and things that they can understand so that I can actually sell what we're trying to do.
Yeah, you bring up such an important point, and I think there's such a lesson in your story for the marketers in our audience, which is, if the truism is that the first rule of comedy and marketing both is know your audience, the second piece and is speak in the language of your audience, in particular the internal one. That goes beyond just, you're a business person first and you recognize that marketing is situationally the right lever. Oftentimes is our belief, but situationally. And I love your use of metaphor and analogies that, in fact, lean into his lived experience as a way of bringing the point to life. And I can't imagine, I've never met Mark, but I can't imagine the challenge of having to explain, and it's not about Mark, but to very rational, brilliant and rational people, the import of emotion and the subconscious in decision making. But I want to go back and ask you if there are a couple of things that you could wave the proverbial magic wand and address any misconception that you think the rest of the C-suite needs, in fact, to address, even if on their own, about marketing.
Again, I think what we call misconceptions sometimes is lack of true understanding of what the marketing function can provide.
Yeah, that's really fair.
And one thing that we don't talk a lot about is that the same marketers that you and I know that are outstanding at doing cluster analysis, finding insights, figuring out how to do one-on-one communications with the consumers, we're terrible doing the internal piece. Yeah. Terrible. It's almost like we've done the great job with our customer base, but we are not taking care of our internal constituents to the same level of care and empathy.
Yeah.
And understanding that we do with the consumer, because it's kind of like we figure the consumer piece out. We know what wins. By the way, we have research, but then we have the same little deck, and we go to all the sales, all the different people in that you need to get support on, and you're expecting a standing ovation, and most of them go like, "Well, that's kind of nice. I don't know what that does to my problem." So the whole notion of that marketing needs to be 360 degrees around, and that the internal constituents require the same level of care, understanding and empathy, again, especially in the non-CPG world, is something that we need to do better. Listen, you and I have seen this. I tend to be extremely disciplined. I did not go to any external things during my first year in office for
I know, I found that very frustrating. You turned me down over and over again.
But it is done with purpose, which is Antonio is concerned about internal. I've seen all sorts of CMOs. First thing that they do is they get to a new job. Let's go to Cannes. Let's go to this. Let's go. It again, in the non-CPG world, it drains from your credibility. It actually means that you really don't understand the perception that your colleagues have of the marketing function, and we should be doing exactly the opposite and showcase what we can do. I'm very, Seth, like you, I am very proud of our craft. I am very proud of what we can do, and I get frustrated when we get the bad rap, that we get, but I also get frustrated with the fact that we need to own this too.
100%. And in fact, I'll drop it into the show notes, but kind of a remarks I gave at our CMO summit in Miami, and I think what year is it? 25 and 23 were titled "Marketing Needs Much Better Marketing," and there were two parts to that, and I think I may have mentioned it on this show before, so forgive the redundancy, audience, please. But it was like, we need to do a better job of marketing externally, but we absolutely need to do a better job of marketing internally. And what you speak about, which again I think is really important for it, it's not just earning a seat at the table. Yes, it is absolutely that, but it's earning the permission to go do what you were hired to do. And if they don't understand, they're not going to give you the permission and that trust. I remember at that same CMO summit, Carla Hassan took the stage and she was talking about something, and she said, it's really important to know how your company makes money. And the audience kind of like collectively oohed and awed. And I was kind of like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Of course, I mean, not Carla, right? Her point was really good, but like, that shouldn't be an insight. That shouldn't be like, oh, I never thought about it that way. If you'd never thought about it that way, you're not a particularly good business person, let alone CMO, it would seem. But you've said something to me. You and I sat down. I think it was shortly after I got to Forbes, so it was probably early 22 or 23. We met at AdColor, and we were having coffee, and we were talking about the complexities of the job. And you said something to me that I've quoted at least 100 times, always with attribution, by the way, which is, you say today's CMO has to be the CEO of the function. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you can unpack what you mean by that, because I have my own interpretation, and why you think not just that the CMO needs to operate that way, but how her C-suite colleagues need to understand the evolution of the role to that.
The reason why I mentioned that, Seth, is a real understanding of how our beautiful craft has evolved and the number of different capabilities that a high-performing marketing organization needs to have. So take performance or growth marketing and our ability to do that. Take leveraging data, MarTech, and insights to deliver the right level of creative for the right audience. Talk about all the effort, process, systems, and capabilities that you need to manage data, to translate that to insights so that it can drive instant connection. Take everything that we need to do when you're doing this at a global scale. The truth of the matter is that it is impossible for even someone like me that has been doing this for a long time to be able to say, oh, and by the way, add the new component of AI and what AI and AI on data, and then generative AI on everything that has to do with connection. It is impossible for a CMO to be a subject matter expert of each and every one of those disciplines. So the way that I see it is, okay, I am the CEO of this function. It is my role to ensure that I have the best possible people in those areas that I am responsible for. By the way, it comes to that. And do I have the right people? Do I have the right processes? Do I have the right means for superior implementation of it? So what that means is that Antonio the artisan needs to bring or raise up to Antonio the CEO of the function to ensure that we're able to deliver against everything that we are supposed to deliver. The thing says, and I think that the moment you and I have been doing this for a long time. I have been doing it longer than you.
I'm not sure that's true.
The moment is amazing. Every time that there is dramatic disruption in the market, everyone gets confused.
Yeah.
Marketing, who's supposed to have the pulse of the stakeholders, and I'm not talking consumer, I'm talking the stakeholders,
Yep.
which includes government. It gives us an opportunity to actually show our worth beyond brand creative in terms of overall strategy. Also, when it comes to the new technologies like AI, and it is all will always be done at the service of the customer experience. And who other than marketing can actually bring all that to bear? So I think that's what I'm excited about, and all the time that I spent with the business is about that. I mean, this give you very specific example and stories. All this disruption that is coming from AI, and it's coming from the fluidity of the hybrid workplace, home, office, and the shifts, is creating a huge opportunity for redefining the future of work.
Yeah.
Redefining how to drive performance, but at the same time, how to drive not personal fulfillment, professional fulfillment. How does that translate into comprehensive offerings for my company? That's what my team is doing at a moment of transition, and it's bringing the marketing function to the center of the business strategy. And that to me is so the need is there. Every time there's a transformation, we saw it when, I mean, you and I remember when we went digital, and the first thing that happened was a lot of jobs were lost in the agency and in the client side. What we did not see, which I believe is what we're going to about to see, is all the new jobs that were created that were different than the previous jobs. Google was invented, Meta was invented, LinkedIn was invented, Amazon was invented, Microsoft took off. It's kind of like, and in those times, those that are responsible for understanding trends and customers should have a leading voice in the companies. And that's honestly, that's what I'm excited about. That's what I came back.
Yeah, and I want to talk about your coming back in a second, just being mindful of time as well. But I think that what you've described is kind of, it's the ideal state. I mean, from my perspective, it's of course right, but a lot of org design, going back to what you said earlier about, that my words, but I think your point, which is, that which should be integrated is often isolated. What do you think a chief executive who's ultimately in charge of and accountable to the organizational design to facilitate the connection of all those things that connects, like, what's your advice to the CEO whose organization is isolated, not integrated, about how to think about putting that org back together, recognizing that, McKinsey and make gazillions of dollars and take years to do that work? I'm going to ask you to do it in 30 seconds.
You're talking the CEO or the CMO?
CEO.
I think Carla said this once, and I believe
Carla getting 2 name checks.
The 2 most important relationship of a CMO are the CEO and the CFO.
Yep.
And those relationships has to be cultivated, and those relationships take time. And I have to say that to the extent the times that I have been most successful in my roles are the times where I have had the strongest relationship with both of those characters, the CEO and the CFO. The advice to the CEO is, if you want growth, you should talk to the CMO and ask her how is she going to be capable of delivering that piece. And the advice to the CMO is for her to be able to stand up and say, even if she's not asked, this is what we can do to actually drive the business, utilizing the works of the business within the context of what is relevant to the multiple stakeholders within the company.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I saw a definition, and I don't remember by whom, of a CEO's job that kind of boiled it down from this person's perspective to they're an investment banker and their job is to allocate scarce resources to opportunity. And I was like, yeah, I'm sure it's a lot more than that, of course, but I like that, as kind of a premise. And of course, the CMO has that same job too. Back to your CEO of the function, right? Your job ultimately is to allocate resources that are in fewer supply than even good strategic opportunities to figure out where the greatest efficacy and return will be near term and on a more sustainable basis. And I tend to think that as a practice, we've lost sight of that a little bit and chase, because of very human the idiosyncrasies and nature of human beings. We chase many things that get in the way of that rather than staying focused on that. And I wonder now if you've got any advice to a CMO on how to stay focused and not distracted, because the distractions are real and many of them are meaningful, at least potentially.
Yeah, I was having this conversation with my team just yesterday. When in doubt, follow the numbers, which is a plan has been approved. We know what we need to deliver, and spend your money and your time proportional to that business priorities. Part of the issue is when the CMO becomes distracted with this other thing because it's cool and they think that they can deliver higher levels of growth. And my response is always, if you triple that business, you still will not make plan. Follow the money. And
Follow the
and
money.
and and when in doubt, you follow the money, which is you have initiatives that are going to deliver the highest level of return short term and others that you're banking for the long term, and you should use that as your barometer. We get in trouble when our heart as opposed to our brain is making those decisions, and focus, as my daughters like to make fun of my accent, is probably the one thing that I think as a discipline we can all use more of.
Well, if it's any comfort, my children make fun of pretty much everything, but perhaps not my accent. All right, I want to end, because we are getting on time, where we usually begin, which is kind of these quick questions and answers, to get your perspectives on them. So if you'll indulge me, if it's a fill in the blank,
Marketing is the discipline to drive growth through preferred and trusted brands.
I think that you are the first of our guests to talk about it in that context, right? To talk about it as the strategy as it is. It is a business strategy. It is a discipline, and not give it kind of a more qualitative answer. I'm really grateful for that. Okay, if that's what marketing is, what from your perspective is a brand?
Brand is the promise that we make to all of our stakeholders in terms of the experience that they should expect from us.
Does it so given my job, I see a lot of pitches and decks and remits and spec sheets and whatnot. I see a lot of CMOs talking about brand objectives, and while there are, of course, brand objectives, brand is fundamentally a strategy, right? It's the great differentiator, it's the great performance driver. It is, but it exists solely to drive growth. Do you agree with that? And do you think there's a reason it's kind of gotten confused as something else?
I believe in that. I grew up in that world. That is what you're taught in the consumer good world. The moment that we moved outside of it, and the scope of the function was narrowly defined to kind of communications, it became almost like an end in itself, with softer metrics that some people were seeing and some people were not seeing. So that the whole notion of being able to integrate the marketing objectives within the business and not as an isolated, almost vanity metrics is critical. And again, people that came from the client side understand that really well. Sometimes if you haven't had that formation, it takes you a bit longer to figure that out.
Yeah, for sure. All right, you talked a bit about the hardest part of being a CMO, which leads to the CEO of the function. What, putting your empathetic hat on, though you wear it all the time, actually, what's the hardest part of being a CEO from your perspective?
Oh my God, managing 360 degrees of pressure. It is the pressure of the financial markets. It is the pressure of the boards. It is the pressure of competitors. It is the pressure of employees. It is the pressure coming from clients. It is really a very, very difficult job. And because of that, when a CEO can rely on someone or a function that can actually help bring clarity into what a vision can be, what growth can be like, how we can service our customers better, how we can make our employees proud, it becomes invaluable. And that's what we can do.
In bringing up how we make our employees proud, I think you implicitly speak again to the power and import of brand, right? Which is the intangible value that a strong brand has in terms of talent, recruiting, and retention, even beyond, the shelf, whether that be a literal or proverbial shelf. And I think the C-suite understands that implicitly. But back to your example about Zuck, may sometimes benefit from being reminded. Okay, so my last question for you, and as I look at it, I recognize I'm uncomfortable with my own phrasing. The phrasing is brands and businesses grow when, but what I've done is in phrasing it that way, I've separated brand from business strategy. So I will edit it moving forward. But businesses grow when
you have vibrant, preferred, and trusted brands, which is what gives the value of the company.
Antonio Lucio, thank you so much for being with us. I as anyone who knows me knows, I'm not a smoke blower, but you are a legit legend, and deservedly so. And I'm really grateful you joined us. Thank you.
And don't sell yourself too short. You are one as well, and I always enjoy talking to you. Always make me think. So thank you very much for that.
Well, if you want to say anything more flowery about me, we can keep recording. I'd be fine with that. I like it. I'm not mad. But otherwise...
You have great-looking glasses, too.
Likewise. Thank you to our audience. If you like what you heard, don't forget to smash that subscribe button and leave a review. And also reach out to us if you've got points of view that differ with what you heard or things you think we should do. We appreciate your being with us. And Antonio, thank you again.